The pain you're describing doesn't match your presentation, doctor. The words hit Elise Turner like ice water as she doubled over on the emergency room stretcher, her research coat still damp with sweat from her frantic drive to the hospital. Your vitals are stable. Sometimes we can overreact to discomfort when we think we know too much about medicine. Dr. James Whitfield barely looked up from his tablet as he spoke, his tone carrying that particular blend of condescension that Elise had encountered too many times in her 12 years as a biomedical researcher. But this wasn't about her ego. This was about the searing pain that had torn through her abdomen during her presentation to the hospital board just 2 hours ago. Pain so intense it had left her gasping for breath in front of the very administrators she'd been trying to convince to fund her research on maternal mortality disparities. Dr. Whitfield, I need you to listen to me. Elise forced herself to sit up straighter, fighting through another wave of agony. I'm 8 weeks pregnant, and this pain is not normal. Something is seriously wrong. The attending physician finally glanced at her, his pale blue eyes scanning her face with barely concealed irritation. You mentioned that already. Look, dear. He glanced at his notes. Turner, I understand you're anxious about your pregnancy, but what you're describing sounds like normal cramping. Maybe some gas. Have you been eating differently? Stress can manifest in a lot of ways. Gas. Elise felt something fracture inside her chest that had nothing to do with physical pain. She was a researcher who had spent the last 5 years documenting how Black women's pain was systematically dismissed in emergency rooms across the country. She had published papers on it. She had testified before medical boards about it. And now she was living it. I need an ultrasound, she said, her voice trembling not with fear but with fury. I need blood work. My pain is radiating to my shoulder blade, and I'm having. Dr. Turner. Dr. Whitfield stepped closer to her bed, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a soothing tone. I've been practicing emergency medicine for 15 years. I think I can distinguish between a medical emergency and pregnancy anxiety. What you need is to go home, take some Tylenol, and call your OB in the morning if you're still concerned. Through the thin curtain separating her from the next bed, Elise could hear a young white woman receiving immediate attention for what sounded like similar symptoms. The contrast wasn't lost on her. Nothing ever was anymore. My heart rate has increased by 20 beats per minute since I arrived, Elise said, pulling out her phone to show him the readings from her fitness tracker. My pain scale is an 8 out of 10, and I'm experiencing radiating pain patterns consistent with. Are you trying to diagnose yourself? Dr. Whitfield's patience was clearly wearing thin. Look, I appreciate that you have medical knowledge, but sometimes that can work against patients. You're overthinking this. Elise stared at him, recognizing the exact moment when her professional credentials transformed from asset to liability in his mind. She had seen it happen to countless women in her research interviews, the moment when their education became evidence of hysteria rather than credibility. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. Another crushing wave of pain doubled her over, and this time she couldn't suppress the cry that escaped her lips. But when she looked up, Dr. Whitfield was already writing something on his clipboard. I'm prescribing you something for anxiety, he said without meeting her eyes. And I want you to follow up with your regular doctor tomorrow. The nurse will give you discharge instructions. No. The word came out sharper than Elise intended. I'm not leaving. I know my body, and I know medicine, and I'm telling you that something is catastrophically wrong. Dr. Whitfield sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of his authority. Dr. Turner, I understand that your background might make you more sensitive to these situations. But I can't order unnecessary tests because of anxiety. That's not how medicine works. Her background. The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Elise felt the familiar sting of racial othering wrapped in professional language. The suggestion that her blackness made her inherently unreliable, emotional, incapable of rational thought about her own body. She had interviewed hundreds of women who had sat in this exact position, dismissed by doctors who saw their pain through the distorted lens of racial bias. Women who had been sent home with deadly conditions because their symptoms were attributed to drug-seeking, hysteria, or simple overreaction. Women like herself who had advanced degrees and medical knowledge but found that none of it mattered when filtered through assumptions about Black women's pain tolerance and credibility. The irony was devastating. Just 2 hours ago, She had been presenting her latest research findings to the hospital board, showing them data that proved black women were 60% more likely to have their pain dismissed in emergency settings. She had stood before them with charts and graphs and peer-reviewed studies, advocating for policy changes that could save lives. Now she was becoming her own statistic. "Dr. Whitfield," she said, her voice steady despite the pain radiating through her body. "I need you to document in my chart that I requested an ultrasound and blood work, and that you refused to order them. I need you to document that I reported an 8 out of 10 pain level and that you attributed it to anxiety. Can you do that for me?" Something flickered across his face, uncertainty, maybe even the first hint of concern. Doctors didn't like creating paper trails for decisions that might later be questioned. That's not necessary," he said. "If you're really that concerned, I suppose we could do a quick ultrasound. But I'm telling you right now, it's going to be normal, and then I hope you'll consider addressing the anxiety component of this." Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. As Dr. Whitfield reluctantly called for the ultrasound tech, Elise caught a glimpse of the clock on the wall. 3 hours. She had been in this emergency room for 3 hours, fighting for basic medical care while her body screamed that time was running out. She thought about her husband Devon, who was somewhere over the Atlantic on a business trip, unreachable and unaware that their carefully planned future was hanging in the balance. She thought about the research proposal she had just presented, her passionate plea for the hospital to implement bias training and standardized pain assessment protocols. Most of all, she thought about the baby she had only started to dream about, the child she and Devon had been trying to conceive for 2 years, the possibility that had filled her with such joy just last week when the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. When the ultrasound tech finally arrived, her hands were gentle but her expression was grave. The silence in the room stretched like a held breath as she moved the wand across Elise's abdomen, her eyes fixed on the screen that Elise couldn't see. "Doctor," the tech said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of terrible news, "you need to see this." Dr. Whitfield moved to look at the monitor, and Elise watched his face transform from irritation to concern to something approaching horror. The change was so dramatic that she already knew what he was going to tell her before he opened his mouth. "Dr. Turner," he said, his earlier condescension replaced by careful professionalism, "I need to get you to surgery immediately. You have a ruptured ectopic pregnancy with significant internal bleeding. We're looking at a life-threatening situation." The words hit her like physical blows. Ruptured. Life-threatening. The pregnancy that had filled her with such hope was not only lost, it was actively trying to kill her. As the medical team suddenly sprang into action around her, preparing for emergency surgery, Elise felt a terrible clarity settle over her pain-racked body. This wasn't just a personal tragedy. This was everything she had been fighting against, everything her research had predicted, playing out in real time in her own life. She was about to lose her baby because a doctor had looked at her black face and decided her pain wasn't real. But as they wheeled her toward the operating room, one thought cut through her grief with crystalline precision. She was still alive, still conscious, still able to fight, and she was going to make damn sure this never happened to another woman again. 6 hours later, Elise woke up in a recovery room with a hollow ache where hope used to live. The surgery had been successful, her life was no longer in danger, but the baby she and Devon had dreamed about was gone, along with her right fallopian tube. Dr. Whitfield had saved her life, but only after his dismissal had nearly cost it. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was alive because of the same medical system that had almost killed her. Her phone buzzed with missed calls from Devon, whose flight was still somewhere over the Atlantic. She couldn't bring herself to listen to his voicemails yet. How do you tell the man you love that your shared dream died while he was unreachable, 30,000 feet above the ocean? Instead, she found herself scrolling through her research files, the data that had consumed her life for the past 5 years. Files that suddenly felt less like academic work and more like prophecy. It had started with her sister Nia's death 3 years ago. Nia had been 28, vibrant, and 8 months pregnant when she went to the emergency room complaining of severe headaches and blurred vision. The attending physician, a tired resident at the end of a long shift, had attributed her symptoms to pregnancy stress and sent her home with instructions to rest. 12 hours later, Nia suffered a massive stroke caused by eclampsia that could have been prevented with proper monitoring. She died 2 days later, along with the niece Elise would never meet. That's when Elise had pivoted her biomedical research from cardiac applications to maternal health disparities. What she discovered had shattered her faith in the medical system she had dedicated her life to serving. Black women in America were 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. But the statistics only told part of the story. The real horror was in the details, the countless cases of dismissed symptoms, delayed diagnoses, and deadly assumptions about black women's pain tolerance. Her phone rang, interrupting her dark spiral through memory. Dr. Patricia Reeves, her research mentor and the closest thing she had to family in the medical community. Elise, honey, I just heard. How are you holding up? Dr. Reeves had been the one to encourage Elise's research into maternal health disparities, even when other colleagues suggested she was too emotionally invested in the topic. As one of only 12 black women department heads at major research hospitals nationwide, Patricia understood the weight of fighting battles that most people preferred to ignore. I'm alive, Elise said, which felt like the most honest answer she could give. I'm coming to see you. Have you spoken to Devon? He's still on the plane. Patricia, I need you to know something. What happened to me tonight? It's everything we've been documenting. Everything we've been warning them about. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Tell me. Elise recounted the evening's events, her voice steady and clinical, as if she were presenting a case study rather than reliving her own trauma. She described Dr. Whitfield's dismissive attitude, his refusal to order tests, his suggestion that her medical knowledge was making her overthink her symptoms. Jesus, Patricia whispered when Elise finished. Elise, you could have died. I know. And I know I'm not the first, and I won't be the last unless something changes. What are you thinking? Elise stared at the ceiling, feeling something crystallize in her chest, a hardness that hadn't been there before her surgery. I'm thinking it's time to stop documenting the problem and start forcing solutions. An hour later, Patricia arrived with coffee and the kind of fierce determination that had made her a legend in academic medicine. She was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing, the kind of person who could dismantle sexist arguments in faculty meetings with surgical precision. I've been thinking about what you said, Patricia began, settling into the chair beside Elise's bed. About forcing solutions. What did you have in mind? Legal action. Media attention. Whatever it takes to make this impossible to ignore. Patricia's expression grew cautious. Elise, I understand the impulse. But you need to think carefully about this. Going public, especially against the hospital where you work, it could end your career. You know how these things go. They'll find ways to discredit you, question your objectivity, suggest you're too emotional to be trusted. Too emotional. Elise laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny how that phrase always seems to surface when women, especially black women, demand accountability. I'm not saying they'd be right. I'm saying that's what they'll do. And once that narrative takes hold. Patricia, respectfully, I don't care about my career anymore. My career didn't save Nia. My credentials didn't save my baby. All my research, all my presentations, all my carefully worded policy recommendations. What good are any of them if the system can still look me in the eye and dismiss me as hysterical? Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. There's something you need to know. Something I probably should have told you months ago. Elise felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. What? Your research proposal, the one you presented to the board today. It wasn't the first time they'd seen those recommendations. What do you mean? I submitted similar findings to the hospital administration 2 years ago. Different data set, same conclusions. They buried it, called it financially unfeasible and potentially damaging to hospital reputation. The betrayal hit Elise like a physical blow. You knew they were going to reject my proposal, and you let me present it anyway. I hoped things had changed. I hoped that with your background, your credentials, the strength of your data, you hoped that I might succeed where you failed. Elise's voice was flat, emotionless. You used me as a test case. Patricia's face crumpled. It wasn't like that. I believed in your work. I still believe in it. But you didn't believe in it enough to warn me that I was walking into a room full of people who had already decided to ignore the problem. Elise turned away, staring out the window at the city lights below. How many other researchers have presented to that board? How many other studies have they buried? Elise, please. I know how this looks, but it looks like the system protecting itself. It looks like even the people I trusted most were playing games with my work. Elise's voice broke slightly. I presented my research on the day I lost my baby to the exact problem I was trying to solve. Do you understand how that feels? Do you understand what it's like to become your own statistic? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I've been fighting this battle for 30 years, Elise. 30 years of watching brilliant women get dismissed, overlooked, silenced. I thought if I could help you present the perfect study, with the perfect data, to the perfect audience. There is no perfect audience for this truth, Elise said quietly. Because the truth is that the system is working exactly as designed. It's not broken, it's functioning perfectly to protect white comfort and maintain the status quo. Her phone buzzed with a text from Devon, landing in 20 minutes. Racing to the hospital. I love you. She showed the message to Patricia, who managed a watery smile. He's a good man. He is. And he's going to want to fix this, to make sense of it, to find someone to blame who isn't the entire medical establishment. Elise looked at her mentor, former mentor, with new clarity. But there isn't one person to blame, is there? It's all of us. It's everyone who knew this was happening and decided that incremental change was enough. Everyone who prioritized careers and reputations over lives. What are you going to do? Elise thought about Nia, about the baby she'd lost, about the hundreds of women whose stories filled her research files. Women who had trusted the system to care for them and been betrayed by assumptions, bias, and willful ignorance. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here tonight. I'm going to make sure Dr. Whitfield's name is attached to this story. I'm going to make sure this hospital's reputation suffers the way it should when it nearly kills its own researchers. Patricia paled. Elise, if you go public with this, there will be consequences. Not just for your career, but for mine, for other researchers working in this space. They'll make us all look like troublemakers. Good, Elise said, her voice gaining strength. Maybe it's time someone made trouble. Maybe it's time someone stopped being polite about the fact that black women are dying because doctors don't believe we feel pain. As if summoned by her words, Devon burst through the door, his hair disheveled from the long flight, his eyes wild with panic and love. He crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms, careful of her 4 lines and surgical bandages. I'm so sorry I wasn't here, he whispered against her hair. I'm so sorry. And for the first time since waking up from surgery, Elise allowed herself to cry, not just for the baby they'd lost, but for the innocence she was about to sacrifice in the war she was about to wage. Because tomorrow, she was going to stop being a researcher and become a revolutionary. 3 days after her surgery, Elise sat in her home office surrounded by medical records, research files, and a laptop that would either launch a revolution or destroy her career. Devon moved quietly around the house, bringing her tea and checking on her with the careful attention of someone afraid his wife might shatter if he breathed too loudly. She'd spent 72 hours crafting the thread that would change everything. Not a research paper or a formal complaint. Those would disappear into bureaucratic black holes. Instead, she had written something that couldn't be ignored, buried, or dismissed as academic discourse. A Twitter thread that began, 3 days ago, I almost died because a doctor didn't believe my pain was real. I'm a medical researcher. I have a PhD in biomedical sciences. I was presenting research on maternal mortality disparities hours before I nearly became a statistic myself. Her finger hovered over the tweet button. You sure about this? Devon asked from the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. His voice carried the weight of someone who understood that their lives were about to irrevocably change. Devon Lee was everything Elise hadn't expected when she'd sworn off dating during her doctoral program. A software engineer with gentle hands and a quiet strength that had anchored her through the storm of academic pressure and family tragedy. He approached problems like code, methodically, logically, always believing there was a solution if you just found the right algorithm. But there was no algorithm for what they were about to face. No, Elise said honestly. But I'm sure about the alternative. She clicked tweet. The first thread posted at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 9:45, it had been retweeted 50 times. By 10:30, it was approaching 1,000. By noon, her phone was ringing non-stop with calls from journalists, activists, and women sharing their own stories of medical dismissal. Elise watched the numbers climb with a mixture of satisfaction and terror. Each retweet was validation, but also ammunition for the forces that would inevitably mobilize against her. The first call came from Marcus Williams, the hospital's chief communications officer, a smooth-talking man she'd met briefly at department mixers who specialized in making problems disappear. Dr. Turner, I think we need to talk. I'm listening. What you've posted online, it's concerning. Not just the accusations, but the potential impact on the hospital's reputation and the patients we serve. When people lose faith in our emergency department, maybe they should lose faith in an emergency department that nearly killed one of its own researchers. Look, I understand you're grieving. What you've been through is tragic, and no one disputes that. But social media isn't the place for resolving medical disputes. We have procedures, protocols for reviewing cases like this. Cases like this. Elise's voice sharpened. How many cases like this are there, Marcus? A pause. That's not what I meant. Dr. Turner, I'm calling because I want to help you. The hospital wants to help you. We're prepared to offer a significant settlement, full support for any fertility treatments you might need in the future, and a formal review of your case that could lead to policy improvements. In exchange for discretion, a private resolution that serves everyone's interests. Elise looked at her laptop screen, where the replies to her thread were pouring in. Women sharing stories of dismissed endometriosis, ignored heart attack symptoms, delayed cancer diagnoses. A tapestry of medical gaslighting that stretched across racial and socioeconomic lines but disproportionately harmed women who looked like her. Marcus, I need you to understand something. This isn't about money. This isn't about revenge. This is about the fact that my sister died 3 years ago because a doctor didn't believe her symptoms were real. This is about the hundreds of women whose stories are filling my mentions right now. This is about a system that needs to change. And change takes time, Dr. Turner. Change happens through proper channels, through collaboration between institutions and stakeholders. What you're doing, this public campaign, it's destructive. It undermines the very system you're trying to improve. Good. Maybe it needs to be undermined. She hung up and immediately received a text from Patricia. We need to talk. Now. 20 minutes later, Patricia sat in Elise's living room looking like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion or tears or both. They want me to distance myself from you, Patricia said without preamble. The department head called this morning. They are concerned about my professional association with someone making inflammatory public statements. Elise felt her stomach drop. Patricia, I never meant for this to affect you. Of course you did. Patricia's voice was sharp, cutting. You knew exactly what would happen when you posted that thread. You knew they'd come after anyone associated with you, anyone who'd supported your research. You knew, and you did it anyway. Because it was the right thing to do. Right for who? Right for the women whose stories are buried because researchers like me lose our positions. Right for the patients who won't receive care because hospitals circle the wagons and become even more defensive. Devon moved protectively closer to Elise, his engineer's mind clearly struggling to process the emotional complexity of the situation. This wasn't a problem with clean solutions. Patricia, I respected you for 30 years, Elise said quietly. I respected your approach, your patience, your belief that change could happen through proper channels. But Nia is still dead. My baby is still dead. And tomorrow, another black woman will walk into an emergency room and have her pain dismissed by a doctor who's never examined his own biases. So your solution is to burn it all down. My solution is to force them to see what they've been hiding from. Elise pulled up her laptop, showing Patricia the flood of responses. Look at this. Really look at it. These aren't random complaints or isolated incidents. This is systematic medical racism documented in real time by the women who've lived it. Patricia read for several minutes, her expression shifting from anger to horror to something approaching acceptance. Jesus. There are so many of them. And every one of these women trusted the system the way we trusted it. The way I trusted it when I walked into that emergency room. Elise's voice broke slightly. I can't bring back Nia or my baby, but I can make sure their deaths mean something. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, steadier, more resolved. What do you need from me? I need you to be honest. How many other researchers have data like mine? How many studies have been buried or discouraged? Too many. Patricia rubbed her temples. Elise, there's something else you need to know. Dr. Whitfield called the department this morning. He's claiming you were combative, that you refused to follow medical advice, that your accusations are motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate concerns. Of course he is. Elise had expected this, but it still stung. What did the department say? They are opening a formal investigation into your conduct during the emergency room visit. They are questioning whether your emotional state compromised your ability to accurately report the interaction. Devon's hand found Elise's shoulder, his touch gentle but grounding. Can they do that? Question her version of events. They can do whatever they want, Patricia said grimly. Especially when millions of dollars in hospital funding and reputation are at stake. Elise's phone buzzed with a notification. Her Twitter thread had reached 50,000 retweets and was trending nationally under the hashtag #HeartWarming, a tag that had apparently emerged organically from women sharing their own stories of medical dismissal. But the notification wasn't about retweets. It was a direct message from a journalist at the Washington Post. Dr. Turner, I've been following your story and the responses it's generated. I'd like to speak with you about a larger investigation we're conducting into racial bias in emergency medicine. Are you available for an interview? Elise showed the message to Devon and Patricia. This was it, the moment when her personal tragedy would become a national news story, when her fight would expand beyond social media into the realm of investigative journalism and potential policy change. It was also the moment when the full force of institutional power would mobilize against her. If I do this interview, she said quietly, there's no going back. They'll come after my credentials, my research, my character. They'll make me the problem instead of addressing the actual problem. They are already doing that, Devon pointed out. The investigation Patricia mentioned, they are already trying to discredit you. Patricia nodded slowly. He's right. And Elise, there's something else. Something I should have told you from the beginning. She took a deep breath. I've been documenting these cases for years. Quietly, informally, but documenting them. I have files on dozens of similar incidents at hospitals across the region. You've been building a case. I've been building evidence. I was waiting for the right moment, the right platform, the right person to make it impossible to ignore. Patricia looked at Elise with something approaching awe. I think you might be that person. Elise looked at her phone, at the journalist's message that represented a point of no return. Once she stepped into the media spotlight, she wouldn't just be fighting for policy change. She'd be fighting for her own survival against an institutional machine designed to protect itself at all costs. But in the flood of responses to her thread, she saw something that made the choice inevitable. Women sharing stories of children lost, diagnoses delayed, symptoms dismissed. Women whose pain had been invisible until she made her own visible. She typed back to the journalist, "Yes, I'm available. When would you like to talk?" As she hit send, Devon's arms tightened around her, and she felt the weight of what she'd just set in motion. Personal tragedy was about to become public warfare. But for the first time since waking up from surgery, she felt something besides grief and anger. She felt hope. The Washington Post article broke on a Thursday morning with the headline, "When Doctors Don't Believe: How Racial Bias in Emergency Medicine Nearly Killed a Medical Researcher." By evening, Elise's story had been picked up by CNN, NPR, and every major news outlet in the country. The #HeartWarming hashtag exploded across social media as thousands of women shared their own experiences of medical dismissal. The movement had taken on a life of its own, beyond anything Elise had imagined when she'd first hit tweet a week ago. But with visibility came retaliation. Elise discovered this when she tried to access her research files at the hospital and found her keycard had been deactivated. When she called IT, they informed her that her access had been suspended pending the outcome of the ongoing investigation into professional conduct allegations. Professional conduct allegations, she repeated into the phone, standing in the parking garage where she'd been trying to enter the building where she'd worked for 7 years. "I'm sorry, Dr. Turner, but I can't provide details. You'll need to speak with Human Resources." Human Resources, it turned out, was unavailable for the rest of the week. Her direct supervisor wasn't returning calls. Even Patricia had gone silent since their conversation 3 days ago. Devon found her that evening sitting on their living room floor, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens, trying to reconstruct her research from backup files and personal notes. "They locked me out," she said without looking up. 7 years of work, and they locked me out like I'm some kind of security threat. "Maybe we should call a lawyer," Devon suggested, settling beside her on the floor. His software company had offered him indefinite time off to support her through this difficult period. A gesture that felt both generous and ominous. "With what money? You know what lawyers cost, and my salary just disappeared." Elise gestured at the papers around her. "Besides, this isn't about legal action anymore. This is about making sure the story doesn't die." Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She'd been getting dozens of these daily, journalists, producers, activists, and women wanting to share their stories. But this caller ID showed a familiar name, Dr. James Whitfield. Dr. Turner? This is James Whitfield. I think we need to talk. Elise put the call on speaker so Devon could hear. I'm listening. Look, I know things have gotten complicated. But I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. What you went through, the loss of your pregnancy, I'm genuinely sorry. His voice carried a carefully modulated combination of professional concern and personal regret that Elise recognized as practiced rather than authentic. Are you calling to apologize, Dr. Whitfield? I'm calling because I'm concerned about the impact this media attention is having on everyone involved. Patients, staff, the hospital's ability to serve the community. I think there might be a way to resolve this that serves everyone's interests. Devon's jaw tightened, and Elise could see him fighting the urge to grab the phone and end the call. What kind of resolution? The hospital is prepared to implement new protocols for pain assessment and patient advocacy. Real changes, Dr. Turner, the kind you've been researching. They are also willing to establish a fund for maternal health research in your name. Significant funding that could advance the work you care about. In exchange for a joint statement acknowledging that what happened was a tragic misunderstanding, not indicative of systemic bias. A commitment from both parties to work together towards solutions rather than. He paused, rather than continuing this adversarial approach. Elise looked at Devon, who was shaking his head almost imperceptibly. Around them, her research files told a different story. Years of documentation proving that what happened to her wasn't a misunderstanding but part of a pattern that killed women every day. Dr. Whitfield, let me ask you something. Do you remember what you said to me that night? Do you remember telling me that my background might make me more sensitive to these situations? Silence on the other end of the line. Do you remember suggesting that my medical knowledge was making me overthink normal pregnancy symptoms? Do you remember attributing my pain to anxiety and gas? Dr. Turner, emergency medicine is complex. In high-pressure situations, communication can sometimes. No. Elise's voice cut through his practiced response. Don't you dare minimize what happened as a communication problem. You looked at a black woman in pain and decided she was lying. You made assumptions about my pain tolerance, my credibility, my mental state based on racist medical myths that have been killing women for centuries. That's not fair. I was following standard protocols. Standard protocols that are built on biased assumptions. Dr. Whitfield, do you know that medical textbooks still teach that black people have higher pain tolerance? Do you know that some medical students still believe our skin is thicker, our nerve endings less sensitive? Devon reached for her hand, providing an anchor as her voice rose with fury and grief. Dr. Turner, I understand you're upset, but accusations of racism are uncomfortable, are inconvenient, are bad for the hospital's reputation. Elise stood up, pacing now. Do you know what's bad for your reputation? Having a medical researcher nearly die in your emergency room because you couldn't see past your own biases. I'm trying to find a way forward here. The hospital is prepared to make real changes. The hospital is prepared to buy my silence. There's a difference. She hung up and immediately received a text from an unknown number. Check your email. They are trying to destroy you. A friend. Her email inbox contained a forwarded message thread between Dr. Whitfield and several hospital administrators. The subject line read, Turner situation, damage control strategies. Elise's hands shook as she read administrators discussing her mental instability, her history of aggressive behavior toward colleagues, and her documented difficulties with authority figures. They were building a character assassination campaign, complete with references to performance reviews that she'd never seen in colleagues who had allegedly complained about her unprofessional conduct. None of it was true, but truth wasn't the point. The point was creating enough doubt about her credibility to undermine her story. Devon, look at this. She showed him the emails, watching his face cycle through confusion, anger, and protective fury. They are making things up. Complete fabrications. Not fabrications. Careful manipulations of truth. Elise pointed to specific phrases. See here. They reference my confrontational presentation style during the board meeting. Technically true, I was passionate about my research. But in this context, it sounds like evidence of mental instability. Her phone rang again. Patricia this time. Elise, we need to meet. Tonight. There are things you need to know before this goes any further. Patricia, if you're calling to tell me to accept their settlement offer. I'm calling to tell you that they've been planning this from the beginning. The investigation, the character assassination, all of it. They knew exactly what would happen when you went public, and they were ready. An hour later, Patricia sat in their kitchen looking like a woman who hadn't slept in days. She placed a thick folder on the table between them. Remember when I told you I'd been documenting these cases informally? I wasn't entirely honest about how informal it was. Elise opened the folder to find meticulous records dating back 5 years. Incident reports, patient testimonials, statistical analyses, and correspondence with hospital administrators who had consistently dismissed or buried evidence of racial bias. Patricia, this is comprehensive. Why didn't you show me this before? Because I was naive enough to think we could change things from within. Because I believed that if we just gathered enough evidence, presented it professionally, worked through proper channels. Patricia's voice broke. Because I was a coward who cared more about my career than about the women dying because of our silence. Devon leaned forward, scanning the documents. This proves everything Elise has been saying. Why haven't you released this? Because the moment I do, my career is over. 30 years of work, gone. My retirement, my research funding, my ability to advocate for change from within the system, all of it disappears. Elise understood the impossible position Patricia was in, but she also understood what was at stake. How many women have died while you've been protecting your career? The words hung in the air like an accusation, which they were. Too many, Patricia whispered. Too many, and I have to live with that. But Elise, if I release this now, they'll destroy both of us. They'll claim we're co-conspirators, that we fabricated evidence to support a predetermined narrative. So what do you suggest? Patricia pulled out another set of documents. There's a congressional subcommittee investigating healthcare disparities. They've been quietly gathering evidence for months, waiting for the right moment to hold hearings. Your story, it could be the catalyst they need. Congressional hearings could take years to result in actual policy changes, Devon pointed out. But they would create a protected forum for testimony. Official record that couldn't be dismissed or buried. Patricia looked directly at Elise. The subcommittee chair wants to meet with you. Informally, off the record. Tomorrow. Elise's phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, the caller ID showed a news station from her hometown, 3 states away. Dr. Turner, this is Channel 7 News. We're investigating allegations that you falsified research data during your doctoral studies. Would you like to comment? Her blood turned to ice. I'm sorry, what? We have sources suggesting that your dissertation research contained fabricated data points and that your degree should never have been awarded. Can you respond to these allegations? Elise hung up, her hands shaking. They're going after my PhD now. Someone's feeding lies to journalists about my dissertation research. Devon moved closer, his presence both comforting and insufficient against the magnitude of what they were facing. This is getting scary, Elise. They are not just attacking your credibility, they are trying to destroy your entire professional identity. Which means they are terrified, Patricia said quietly. People don't launch this kind of coordinated attack unless they know they are in real danger of being exposed. Elise looked at the documents spread across her kitchen table. Years of evidence that could save lives if it ever saw the light of day, and the growing proof that powerful forces would do anything to keep it buried. Her phone buzzed with a text from the mysterious friend who had sent the earlier email. They are planning something big for tomorrow. The congressional meeting is a trap. Don't go alone. Outside, a car had been parked across the street for the past hour, its occupants occasionally taking photos of their house. The visible surveillance was almost certainly meant to intimidate rather than actually gather intelligence. It was working. Devon, she said quietly, what if we're in over our heads? What if fighting this costs us everything and changes nothing? He took her hands in his engineer's mind searching for solutions in an increasingly impossible equation. Then we'll lose everything fighting for something that matters. But Elise, we don't have to do this alone. Look at what's happening online. Thousands of women are standing with you. This isn't just your fight anymore. Patricia stood up, gathering her documents. I have a choice to make tonight. Keep these files safe and hope someone else fights this battle, or release them and accept the consequences. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what I should have done 3 years ago when your sister died. I'm going to stop being complicit. Patricia's voice carried a new strength, as if deciding to act had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for years. Elise, if you're meeting with that congressional subcommittee tomorrow, you won't be going alone. As Patricia left, Elise and Devon sat in their kitchen surrounded by evidence of a system designed to protect itself at any cost. Tomorrow would bring new attacks, new pressures, new attempts to silence her voice and bury the truth. But tonight, for the first time since this began, she didn't feel alone in the fight. The movement she'd started with a single tweet had become bigger than her personal tragedy. It had become a force that institutional power couldn't simply wish away or buy off. Now she just had to survive long enough to see it through. The congressional office building felt like a fortress designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Elise sat in the waiting area outside Congresswoman Rosa Martinez's office, Patricia beside her clutching the folder of evidence that could change everything. Devin had wanted to come, but they'd agreed that keeping him out of the official record was safer, for now. "You nervous?" Patricia asked, though her own hands were visibly shaking. "Terrified," Elise admitted. "But not of them. I'm terrified of hoping too much." The past week had been a whirlwind of media appearances, legal consultations, and sleepless nights spent documenting every threat and attack on her credibility. The Hear Her Pain movement had grown to include congressional representatives, medical professionals, and celebrities, but it had also attracted the kind of organized opposition that made Elise's blood run cold. Congresswoman Martinez emerged from her office, a small, fierce woman who'd built her career fighting for healthcare reform. "Dr. Turner, I'm Rosa Martinez. Thank you for coming." The office was smaller than Elise had expected, lined with medical journals and photos of Martinez with healthcare workers from across the country. This felt real, legitimate, like actual change might be possible. "Before we begin," Martinez said, settling behind her desk, "I want you to know that what you've started has given us the political capital to push forward legislation that's been stalled for years. The Federal Healthcare Equity and Accountability Act. It could mandate bias training, standardize pain assessment protocols, and create oversight mechanisms for exactly the kind of discrimination you experienced." Elise felt a flutter of hope. How long before something like that could pass? With the right pressure, the right evidence, and the right political moment. 6 months. Maybe less. Martinez leaned forward. "But I need to be honest with you about what that means. The medical industry lobby is going to fight this with everything they have. They'll spend millions trying to discredit you, your research, and anyone associated with this movement." Patricia spoke for the first time since entering the office. "Congresswoman, we understand the risks. But the evidence we have, it's undeniable." "I hope so. Because if there are any holes in your documentation, any inconsistencies in your story, they'll exploit them." Martinez's expression grew serious. "Dr. Turner, I have to ask, are you prepared for your entire life to be under scrutiny? Your marriage, your finances, your academic record, your medical history." "They are already doing that," Elise said. "Yesterday a journalist called asking about my student loan payments from 8 years ago, trying to imply I have financial motivations for speaking out. It's going to get worse. Much worse." Martinez pulled out a thick file. "This is what my staff has compiled on the opposition research being conducted on you. They have teams of investigators, Dr. Turner. They are going through your undergraduate transcripts, interviewing former colleagues, examining every paper you've ever published." Elise's stomach dropped as she flipped through the file. Photos of her house, her car, detailed financial records, and interviews with people she hadn't spoken to in years, all compiled by private investigation firms working for medical industry groups. "They are treating you like a threat to national security," Martinez continued. "Which, in a way, you are. You're threatening a system that generates billions of dollars in revenue by maintaining the status quo." Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "Congresswoman, about the legislation you mentioned, what would it actually require?" "Mandatory bias training for all medical personnel, standardized pain assessment tools that account for racial disparities, federal oversight of emergency departments with high rates of adverse outcomes for patients of color, and legal protections for patients who file discrimination complaints." "Legal protections?" Elise asked. "Right now, patients who file complaints about racial bias can be blacklisted from medical facilities, denied care, or face retaliation from providers. The law would make that illegal and create federal enforcement mechanisms." It was everything Elise had dreamed of, real, systemic change that could save lives. But Martinez's expression suggested there was more. "However, for legislation this significant to pass, we need testimony from multiple credible sources. Dr. Turner, your story started this conversation, but it can't be the only voice. We need other researchers, other patients, other medical professionals willing to go on record." Patricia cleared her throat. "Congresswoman, about that, I may have additional sources." "Patricia." Elise turned to her mentor, confused. What additional sources? Remember when I said I'd been documenting cases informally for years? I wasn't working alone. Patricia's voice was steady, but something in her eyes made Elise's chest tighten. There's been a network of researchers, administrators, and legal advocates quietly building evidence for this exact moment. A network. Elise felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. What kind of network? Martinez and Patricia exchanged a look that Elise didn't understand but definitely didn't like. Dr. Turner, Martinez said carefully, Patricia contacted my office 3 months ago, before your emergency room incident. She'd been working with civil rights organizations to identify the right case, the right plaintiff, to challenge medical racism in court and in Congress. The words hit Elise like physical blows. The right plaintiff. Your research background, your credibility, your personal story, it was exactly what we needed to make this issue impossible to ignore, Patricia said. When you went to that emergency room, when Dr. Whitfield dismissed your symptoms, it created the perfect catalyst for legislative action. You're saying? Elise's voice was barely a whisper. You're saying you knew this would happen? No. Patricia leaned forward urgently. I never knew you would be hurt. I never wanted that. But when it happened, I realized we had an opportunity to save countless other women by making your story matter. You used me. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Elise felt like she might collapse. You used my trauma, my lost pregnancy, as a political opportunity. Elise, please. It's not like that. Everything I've done has been to prevent other women from going through what you experienced. Everything you've done has been to advance your political agenda. Elise stood up, her voice rising. You let me believe I was making an independent choice to go public. You let me think I was bravely speaking truth to power when I was actually just playing a role you'd written for me. Martinez intervened. Dr. Turner, I understand your anger, but please consider the bigger picture. With or without Patricia's network, your experience was real. The discrimination you faced was real. The need for legislative action is real. But my agency wasn't real. My choice wasn't real. Elise turned back to Patricia, feeling years of trust crumble. How long have you been planning this? Since Nia died. Since before. Patricia's face crumpled. Since before. Since the first time I saw a black woman die because her pain wasn't believed. Since the first time I realized that individual advocacy wasn't enough to change a system designed to discriminate. So when I came to you with my research, when I trusted you with my work, my career, my family's tragedy, you saw an opportunity. I saw someone brilliant enough and passionate enough to make a difference. Someone who could be the voice this movement needed. Elise felt something break inside her chest, not just trust in Patricia, but trust in her own judgment, her own agency. Did Devon know? When he encouraged me to go public, was he part of your network too? No, Patricia said quickly. Devon knows nothing about this. Neither do the journalists, the activists, any of the women sharing their stories online. This movement is real, Elise. The support you're receiving is genuine. But it's built on manipulation. On lies. Martinez stood up, her voice taking on a more formal tone. Dr. Turner, I need to ask you directly. Are you still willing to testify before Congress about your experience? Are you still committed to pushing for legislative change? Elise looked at the woman who had just revealed that her personal tragedy had been turned into political theater, at the mentor who had betrayed her trust while claiming to serve the greater good. I need time to think. Elise, please. Patricia reached for her arm. Don't let your anger at me destroy the opportunity to save lives. Don't let my mistakes invalidate the importance of this work. But Elise was already walking toward the door, her mind reeling with the implications of what she'd just learned. How much of her story was real, and how much was orchestrated? How many of the people supporting her knew she was being manipulated? How many other women were being used as political chess pieces in movements they thought they were leading? Her phone buzzed with a text from Devon. How did the meeting go? I'm proud of you for fighting this fight. The innocence in his message broke something inside her. At least Devon's support was real. At least their marriage was built on truth rather than political calculation. But as she stood in the hallway outside Martinez's office, Elise realized the full scope of what she was facing. This wasn't just about changing medical protocols or passing legislation. This was about discovering that even her allies had been playing games with her trauma, that even the people she trusted most saw her pain as a tool to be leveraged rather than a wound to be healed. The movement was bigger than her. The fight was more important than her feelings. But the cost of winning was higher than she'd ever imagined. She had become a symbol rather than a person, a cause rather than a grieving woman, a political opportunity rather than a researcher seeking truth. And the worst part was, she still believed the fight was worth it. She just wasn't sure she could trust anyone to fight it with her. Her phone rang. Devon. Elise. You sound upset. What happened? Standing in the marble hallway of a congressional office building, surrounded by the portraits of lawmakers who had fought their own battles for justice, Elise realized she had to make a choice. She could walk away from all of it, the legislation, the movement, the public scrutiny, and return to a private life built on the ashes of her trust. Or she could accept that she'd been manipulated and used, and choose to fight anyway, not because Patricia or Martinez or anyone else wanted her to, but because the women dying in emergency rooms across the country deserved better than the system that had nearly killed her. Devon, she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. I think we need to talk. And I think we need to get a lawyer. A really good one. What's wrong? Everything. And nothing. I'll explain when I get home. As she hung up, Elise realized that this moment, standing alone in a government building, betrayed by her mentor and used by politicians but still committed to fighting for change, this was when her real agency began. Not when she'd tweeted her story, not when she'd agreed to interviews, but now, when she chose to continue fighting despite learning that her pain had been commodified by the very people claiming to support her. The revolution would continue. But from now on, it would be on her terms. The lawyer's office felt like a bunker, and Elise was beginning to understand why. Rachel Cohen specialized in whistleblower protection and civil rights cases, which meant she was accustomed to clients whose lives had been turned into war zones by powerful institutions determined to silence them. They've escalated beyond character assassination, Rachel said, spreading documents across her conference table. This is systematic destruction. 3 weeks had passed since the congressional meeting, 3 weeks since Elise had learned that her mentor had been manipulating her story for political gain. In that time, the attacks had intensified beyond anything she could have imagined. Her doctoral advisor from 8 years ago had been contacted by investigators claiming she'd plagiarized portions of her dissertation. Her undergraduate professors had been asked about her emotional stability and tendency toward false accusations. Former colleagues had been interviewed about her combative personality and difficulties accepting criticism. None of it was true, but truth wasn't the point. The point was creating enough smoke that people would assume there was fire. The most concerning development, Rachel continued, is this. She handed Elise a legal document. The hospital is filing a defamation lawsuit against you. They are claiming your public statements have caused irreparable harm to their reputation and requesting damages in the amount of $50 million. Devon's face went pale. 50 million? We don't have 50 million. We don't have 50,000 in savings. The amount isn't the point, Rachel explained. The point is to force you into bankruptcy defending yourself, to make you an example of what happens when someone challenges medical institutions publicly. The most concerning development, Rachel continued, is this. She handed Elise a legal document. The hospital is filing a defamation lawsuit against you. They are claiming your public statements have caused irreparable harm to their reputation and requesting damages in the amount of $50 million. Devon's face went pale. 50 million? We don't have 50 million. We don't have 50,000 in savings. The amount isn't the point, Rachel explained. The point is to force you into bankruptcy defending yourself, to make you an example of what happens when someone challenges medical institutions publicly. Elise stared at the lawsuit, feeling the weight of institutional power pressing down on her like a physical force. Can they win? Probably not, if we can prove your statements were accurate. But defending against a lawsuit this size will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the process could take years. Rachel's expression was grim. They don't need to win, Dr. Turner. They just need to destroy your life in the process of fighting it. What about the congressional testimony? The legislation Congresswoman Martinez mentioned. That's where things get complicated. Rachel pulled out another file. The medical industry lobby has launched a full-scale campaign against the Healthcare Equity and Accountability Act. They are arguing that the legislation is based on unsubstantiated claims by a discredited researcher with a history of making false accusations. The room fell silent except for the sound of Elise's world collapsing. They are using me to kill the legislation, she said quietly. My credibility issues are becoming the reason to reject the entire bill. It gets worse. Rachel hesitated. Patricia Reeves has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into her research practices. The network she mentioned, the civil rights organizations, the other researchers, they are all distancing themselves from her and, by extension, from you. Devon stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. So let me understand this. Elise almost died because of medical racism. She spoke out about it. The people who were supposed to support her manipulated her story for political gain. And now the same system that nearly killed her is using their manipulation as evidence that she can't be trusted. That's exactly right, Rachel said. And it's working. The Hear Her Pain movement is losing momentum as questions about Dr. Turner's credibility spread. Women are still sharing their stories, but the media attention has shifted to focus on the controversy surrounding Elise rather than the systemic issues she raised. Elise felt like she was drowning. So everything I've sacrificed, my career, my privacy, my sense of safety, it's all been for nothing. Not for nothing, Rachel said carefully. But the institutional response has been more sophisticated and more brutal than anyone anticipated. Devon returned to his seat, taking Elise's hand. But even his touch felt different now, protective rather than supportive, worried rather than confident. Elise, maybe it's time to consider stepping back, accepting a settlement, moving somewhere else, starting over. The suggestion hit her like a betrayal, even though she knew he was trying to protect her. You want me to give up? I want you to survive. I want us to survive. Devon's voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. Elise, they are destroying everything we've built. I got called into HR yesterday because someone sent my company anonymous allegations that I'm married to a known fabricator of medical research. Our neighbors are getting calls asking about our financial situation and marital stability. They are investigating our marriage now. They are trying to find any angle to discredit you. And the stresses. Devon stopped, running his hands through his hair. I'm not sleeping. You're not sleeping. We barely talk about anything except the lawsuit and the attacks and the next media appearance. This isn't living, Elise. This is just surviving. Rachel cleared her throat gently. There's one more thing. Something you both need to know. She pulled out a final document. Anonymous sources have provided the media with copies of your medical records from the emergency room visit. Elise's blood turned to ice. That's illegal. Medical records are protected. Someone with access leaked them. And they've been selectively edited. Rachel's voice was carefully controlled. The versions being circulated don't include Dr. Whitfield's notes about dismissing your symptoms or attributing them to anxiety. They only include the portions that make your pain levels seem inconsistent with the final diagnosis. They are making it look like I was exaggerating my symptoms. Or fabricating them entirely. The narrative being pushed is that you manufactured a medical emergency to create grounds for a discrimination lawsuit. Devon stood up again, this time knocking over his chair. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. They are accusing her of deliberately causing a miscarriage for political gain. Not explicitly, but they are raising questions about the timeline, the severity of your reported symptoms, the consistency of your account. Rachel's voice was steady, professional, but Elise could see the anger in her eyes. It's character assassination at the most intimate level possible. Elise stared at the leaked medical records, her private trauma reduced to ammunition in a public relations war. The loss of her pregnancy, the pain that had nearly killed her, the grief that still woke her up at night, all of it twisted into evidence of her supposed dishonesty. I need air, she said, standing up abruptly. I need to be alone for a minute. She walked to the window overlooking the city, watching people move through their normal lives, unaware that 20 floors above them a woman was watching her life disintegrate in real time. Behind her, she could hear Devon and Rachel talking in low voices about exit strategies, settlement negotiations, ways to minimize the damage and salvage what remained of their life together. But all Elise could think about was the women who would die while she fought legal battles and tried to rebuild her reputation. The black mothers who would have their pain dismissed while Congress debated legislation that might never pass. The researchers who would stay silent rather than face the systematic destruction she was experiencing. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We know where you live. We know where your husband works. Stop talking or face consequences. She showed the message to Rachel, who immediately started talking about security measures and police reports. But Elise barely heard her. The threat was just another weight on a pile that was already too heavy to carry. Dr. Turner. Rachel was looking at her with concern. Are you all right? No, Elise said honestly. I'm not all right. I haven't been all right since the moment I walked into that emergency room. And I'm starting to think I may never be all right again. Devon moved to stand beside her at the window. Elise, we can get through this. But maybe we need to accept that you can't fight this battle alone. Maybe it's time to let other people carry the torch. What other people? Patricia betrayed me. The congressional network was using me. The women in the movement are being told I'm not credible. Who's left to carry anything? The silence in the room was answer enough. That evening, Elise sat in her home office staring at a resignation letter she'd been drafting for 3 hours. Resignation from what? She wasn't sure. The hospital had already effectively fired her. The research community had already branded her untouchable, and the movement had already moved beyond her influence. Maybe she was resigning from hope itself. Devon found her there at midnight, still staring at the blank screen. What are you writing? I don't know. A surrender, maybe. An apology. A confession that I'm not strong enough for this fight. He sat down beside her, and for the first time in weeks, they were quiet together without the constant buzz of crisis management. Do you remember, Devon said softly, the night after your sister died? When you couldn't stop crying, and I held you on the bathroom floor while you fell apart. I remember. You said something that night. You said Nia deserved better than a world that didn't believe women's pain. You said you were going to spend your life making sure her death meant something. Elise's eyes filled with tears. That was before I knew the cost. The cost is brutal. The cost is unfair. But Elise, if you stop fighting now, what happens to Nia's memory? What happens to the women who are counting on you? What happens to us? What happens to our marriage, our future, our chance at having a family? Devon was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. But I know I married a woman who wouldn't walk away from a fight this important, no matter how hard it got. Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like stars, beautiful and distant and unreachable. Elise thought about all the women in those lights, in hospital beds, in emergency rooms, in their homes, who were fighting their own battles against systems designed to dismiss their pain. She thought about the baby she'd lost, and the babies other women would lose if nothing changed. She thought about Nia, who had died trusting doctors to save her. And she thought about the choice that had been staring her in the face for weeks. Save herself or save the movement. In the morning, she would have to decide. But tonight, she let Devon hold her while she grieved for everything they were about to lose. The call came at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting Elise from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but urgent. Dr. Turner? This is Dr. Angela Foster from St. Mary's Hospital in Detroit. I'm calling because I think I'm about to become you. Elise sat up in bed, Devon stirring beside her. What do you mean? I'm a black emergency medicine physician. Last night, I was working when a young black woman came in with symptoms identical to what you described in your interviews. Severe abdominal pain, 8 weeks pregnant, radiating pain to her shoulder blade. Dr. Foster's voice shook. My white colleague wanted to send her home with Tylenol and anxiety medication. Elise's blood ran cold. What happened? I overruled him. Ordered an ultrasound immediately. She had a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, massive internal bleeding. We saved her life, but barely. Dr. Foster paused. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't heard your story, if I hadn't insisted on those tests, she would have died. Thank God you were there. Dr. Turner, they're trying to fire me. The hospital administration is claiming I overstepped protocols and undermined a colleague's medical judgment. They are saying I put the patient at unnecessary risk by ordering expensive tests based on political bias rather than medical evidence. Elise closed her eyes, feeling the weight of recognition. They are making you the problem instead of addressing the actual problem. Exactly. And Dr. Turner, there's something else. The patient, her name is Jessica Barnes. She wants to speak out. She wants to tell her story. But she's terrified. She's a single mother. She works 2 jobs. She can't afford to lose her health insurance or face retaliation. Devon was fully awake now, watching Elise's face as the conversation unfolded. Dr. Foster, I need to ask you something. Are you calling because you want advice, or because you want me to do something? I'm calling because I think Jessica's story could save the legislation. Your credibility has been attacked, but Jessica is a fresh voice, a new case that proves the pattern continues. If she testifies alongside you, she could become a target just like I did. They'll destroy her life the way they've destroyed mine. Maybe. But Dr. Turner, if we don't act now, If we let them kill this legislation, how many more women die? How many more Dr. Fosters get fired for trying to save lives? Elise looked at Devon, who was already shaking his head. They both knew what Dr. Foster was really asking. For Elise to step back into the fire she'd been trying to escape, to risk everything she had left for a fight that had already cost her so much. I need time to think, Elise said. Dr. Turner, there isn't time. The congressional vote is scheduled for next week. If we're going to act, it has to be now. After hanging up, Elise sat in the pre-dawn darkness with Devon, both of them understanding that this call had changed everything. You're thinking about doing it, Devon said. It wasn't a question. A woman is alive because of the story I told. A doctor might lose her career because she listened to me. Another woman wants to risk everything to continue the fight. Elise turned to face him. How do I walk away from that? By remembering what it's cost us. By remembering that we're allowed to prioritize our own survival. Are we? Are we really allowed to choose our comfort over other people's lives? Devon's jaw tightened. Elise, you've done enough. You've sacrificed enough. You started a movement. You raised awareness. You've already changed things. Have I? The legislation is dying. The movement is losing momentum. The hospitals are retaliating against doctors who try to implement change. Elise stood up, pacing to the window. What if everything I've done has made things worse for women like Jessica? That's not your responsibility. Isn't it? Before Devon could answer, Elise's phone rang again. Rachel Cohen, their lawyer. Elise, I need to see you immediately. Something's happened. An hour later, they sat in Rachel's office as she delivered news that shattered what remained of Elise's world. The hospital has filed an amended lawsuit. They are now claiming that your public statements have directly resulted in threats against staff members, decreased patient confidence, and financial losses that threaten the hospital's ability to serve the community. That's ridiculous. I never encouraged threats against anyone. It doesn't matter. They are arguing that your inflammatory rhetoric created a hostile environment that endangered patient care. Rachel's expression was grim. But that's not the worst part. They've also filed criminal charges. Devon went white. Criminal charges. Filing false police reports, making fraudulent insurance claims, and, this is the big one, practicing medicine without a license. Practicing medicine without a license. Elise felt like the room was spinning. What are they talking about? They are claiming that when you diagnosed yourself with an ectopic pregnancy in the emergency room, when you insisted on specific tests and treatments, you were essentially practicing medicine. They are saying your medical knowledge doesn't give you the right to direct your own care. That's insane. Every patient has the right to advocate for their own health. Not according to their legal theory. They are arguing that your advanced medical training creates a different standard, that you used your credentials to manipulate medical staff into providing unnecessary care. Elise stared at the criminal complaint, reading charges that could result in years in prison and the permanent destruction of any chance she had at rebuilding her life. How is this legal? It's probably not. But defending against criminal charges, even frivolous ones, will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and take years. And in the meantime, you'll be branded a criminal defendant rather than a civil rights advocate. Devon stood up abruptly. That's it. We're done. Elise, this has gone too far. They are trying to put you in prison for having the audacity to survive medical malpractice. Devon. No. I won't watch them destroy you completely. I won't stand by while they criminalize your trauma. His voice broke. I love you too much to let you sacrifice yourself on the altar of systemic change. The room fell silent except for the sound of Elise's heart breaking. Because she knew Devon was right, and she knew it didn't matter. Rachel, if I testified before Congress next week, if I brought Jessica Barnes with me, if we made one final push for the legislation, could it work? Elise, you're facing criminal charges. Testifying publicly could be seen as witness intimidation, obstruction of justice. It could make everything worse. But could it work? Could it save the legislation? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. If your testimony was powerful enough, if Jessica's story was compelling enough, if the media coverage was overwhelmingly sympathetic, maybe. And if it failed? If it failed, you'd probably go to prison. The charges would stick, the lawsuit would bankrupt you, and the legislation would die anyway. Devon moved to stand in front of Elise, taking her hands in his. Elise, please. Please don't do this. We can move somewhere else, start over, have a quiet life together. We can have the family we always planned, just somewhere else. And Jessica Barnes. And Dr. Foster. And all the women who will face Dr. Whitfield and doctors like him in emergency rooms across the country. They are not your responsibility. Yes, they are. Elise's voice was steady, final. From the moment I tweeted my story, from the moment I decided to speak publicly about what happened, they became my responsibility. Even if it costs you everything, even if it costs us everything. Elise looked at the man she loved, the life they'd built together, the future they'd planned. She thought about the baby they'd lost and the babies they might never have. She thought about the safety and anonymity they could find if they just walked away from all of this. Then she thought about Jessica Barnes, lying on a hospital bed, trusting doctors to save her life. She thought about Dr. Foster, risking her career to do what was right. She thought about Nia, who had died believing the system would protect her. And she thought about the choice that had been building toward this moment for months, the choice between saving herself and saving others. Devon, I need you to understand something. If I walk away now, if I choose our safety over their lives, I won't be the woman you married anymore. I'll be someone who had the power to create change and chose comfort instead. You'll be someone who survived. Someone who chose love over martyrdom. I'll be someone who let other women die to protect her own peace. Devon's face crumpled with the weight of understanding. So you're choosing them over us. I'm choosing to be someone I can live with being. Elise's voice broke. Even if it means I don't get to live very long as her. The silence stretched between them like a chasm that neither could cross. Finally, Devon nodded, tears streaming down his face. Then I'll be there. When you testify, when they arrest you, when they try to destroy you completely, I'll be there. Devon, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because I married a woman who would rather die fighting for justice than live with injustice. And I love her too much to let her face this alone. Elise called Dr. Foster back that afternoon. Dr. Foster? It's Elise Turner. About Jessica Barnes, about testifying before Congress. She took a deep breath. Tell her she won't be alone. Tell her we're going to finish this fight. As she hung up, Elise realized that for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt completely, terrifyingly free. Not because she'd found a way to win without sacrifice, but because she'd finally stopped trying to. The Hart Senate office building buzzed with an energy that Elise had never experienced in her academic career. This wasn't a conference presentation or a research symposium. This was a room where lives could be saved or lost based on the power of testimony and the political will to act. Congresswoman Martinez found Elise in the witness preparation room an hour before the hearing. Dr. Turner, are you ready for this? Elise looked at the woman who had revealed Patricia's manipulation, wondering if she should trust anyone in this building. As ready as someone can be for public execution. It won't be an execution if you stick to the facts. Tell your story. Tell it simply, honestly, without emotion or rhetoric. Martinez paused. The Republicans on the committee are going to try to make this about you rather than about the system. Don't let them. Through the window, Elise could see protesters gathering on both sides of the issue. Signs reading "Hear her pain" mixed with others claiming "Stop false accusations" and "Protect our doctors." The battle lines were drawn, and she was about to walk into the middle of them. Devon appeared in the doorway, his face pale but determined. Elise, there's something you need to see. He handed her his phone, showing a breaking news alert. Hospital whistleblower releases thousands of internal documents proving systematic racial bias in emergency medicine. What is this? Someone inside the hospital system just leaked everything. Patient records, internal communications, training materials, statistical analyses, everything that proves your case wasn't isolated. Devon's voice was tight with excitement and terror. It's massive, Elise. It's undeniable. Martinez grabbed the phone, scrolling through the news reports. This changes everything. With documentation this comprehensive, the committee can't dismiss your testimony as one person's word against the system. But as Elise read the reports, something nagged at her. The timing was too perfect, the leak too convenient. Someone had been sitting on this evidence, waiting for exactly this moment to release it. Congresswoman, who do you think leaked this? Does it matter? The evidence speaks for itself. It matters if someone's been playing a longer game than any of us realized. Before Martinez could respond, an aide appeared in the doorway. Congresswoman, they are ready for Dr. Turner. The hearing room was packed beyond capacity, with cameras from every major news network focused on the witness table. Elise took her seat next to Jessica Barnes, who looked terrified but resolute in a way that reminded Elise of herself 6 months ago. Committee Chairman Senator Robert Hayes gavelled the hearing to order. We're here today to examine allegations of racial bias in emergency medical care and to consider the Federal Healthcare Equity and Accountability Act. Dr. Turner, you've requested to testify first. Yes, Senator. Thank you. Elise looked out at the crowd, seeing faces of women who had shared their stories online, journalists who had covered her case, and hospital administrators who were about to be exposed. In the back row, she spotted Dr. Whitfield, his face a mask of professional composure hiding what she knew must be panic. 6 months ago, I walked into Mercy General Hospital as a respected medical researcher and walked out as a grieving mother who had lost her baby to a system designed to dismiss black women's pain. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of months of preparation and a lifetime of understanding what this moment meant. But today, I'm not here to talk about my personal tragedy. I'm here to talk about a system that has been documented, quantified, and proven to discriminate against women of color in ways that kill us. She gestured to the leaked documents that were now part of the official record. These documents, released just hours ago, contain statistical proof that Mercy General Hospital, and hospitals like it across the country, have different standards of care for black women than for white women. Different pain assessment protocols, different diagnostic timelines, different levels of credibility assigned to identical symptoms. Senator Hayes interrupted. Dr. Turner, before you continue, I need to address the authenticity of these documents. They were obtained through illegal means. Senator, Elise said, her voice cutting through his objection. With respect, I don't care how these documents were obtained. I care that they exist. I care that they document a system that nearly killed me and has killed countless other women. Republican Senator Janet Morrison leaned forward. Dr. Turner, isn't it true that you've been under investigation for falsifying research data? That your own credibility as a researcher has been called into question? Elise had been waiting for this attack. Senator Morrison, yes, I've been investigated. And every single investigation has found that my research was accurate, my methodology sound, and my conclusions supported by evidence. The only thing those investigations have proven is that powerful institutions will do anything, including destroying a woman's reputation, to avoid accountability. But the hospital's lawsuit alleges that you've made false statements. The hospital's lawsuit is an attempt to silence me, and it's working exactly as designed. Elise's voice rose with controlled passion. Senator, while we're sitting in this room debating my credibility, black women are dying in emergency rooms across this country. While you question whether I can be trusted, doctors are dismissing symptoms that would be taken seriously if they came from white patients. Jessica Barnes spoke for the first time, her voice shaking but clear. Senator Morrison, Dr. Turner's story saved my life. When I went to the emergency room with the exact same symptoms she described, Dr. Angela Foster recognized them because she had heard Dr. Turner speak out. Without that, I would have been sent home to die. Ms. Barnes, we appreciate your testimony, but... No, Senator, you don't appreciate it. You're trying to discredit it. Jessica's voice grew stronger. I'm a working mother. I can't afford to be here. I can't afford to lose my job or my health insurance. But I'm here because silence kills women who look like me. The room erupted in applause, which Chairman Hayes quickly gavelled down. Senator Morrison tried again. Dr. Turner, even if we accept your allegations, isn't it true that you've been working with activist organizations to orchestrate this entire narrative? That this is political theater rather than genuine medical advocacy? Elise felt the weight of Patricia's betrayal, of Martinez's manipulation, of the complex web of politics that had surrounded her story from the beginning. And she made a choice. Senator Morrison, you're absolutely right. There have been people trying to use my story for political gain. There have been activists and politicians and researchers who saw my trauma as an opportunity to advance their agendas. She paused, letting the admission sink in. But that doesn't make my story less true. That doesn't bring back my baby or erase the fact that I nearly died because of racial bias. The room was silent, stunned by her unexpected honesty. You want to know the truth? The truth is that I've been manipulated by people I trusted. The truth is that some of the support I've received has been calculated rather than genuine. The truth is that I've been used. Elise's voice grew stronger. But the other truth is that while politicians and activists have been playing games with my story, women have been dying. And if my manipulation and use and public destruction can save even one life, then it's worth it. Senator Morrison looked taken aback. Dr. Turner, are you saying I'm saying that the system is so broken, so biased, so deadly that even the flawed, political, manipulated process that brought us here today is better than the silence that's been killing us for generations. Chairman Hayes leaned forward. Dr. Turner, in your professional opinion, what would it take to address these disparities? Mandatory bias training that acknowledges the historical and ongoing medical racism that shapes how pain is perceived and treated. Standardized assessment tools that can't be subjectively interpreted based on a patient's race. Federal oversight that tracks outcomes by race and holds hospitals accountable for disparities. And legal protections for patients who report discrimination. The very measures outlined in the Healthcare Equity and Accountability Act. Yes, Senator. Exactly those measures. From the back of the room, a commotion erupted. Dr. Whitfield was standing, his face flushed with anger. I object to this entire proceeding. Dr. Turner's allegations are unsubstantiated. Dr. Whitfield, Chairman Hayes said sharply, you're not scheduled to testify. Then I'm requesting to testify. I'm requesting the right to defend myself against these accusations. The room buzzed with tension as Hayes consulted with other committee members. Finally, he nodded. Dr. Whitfield, you have 5 minutes. Whitfield strode to the witness table, his confidence radiating the institutional authority that Elise remembered from that night in the emergency room. Senators, I've been practicing emergency medicine for 15 years. I've treated thousands of patients of all races, and I've never made treatment decisions based on race. His voice carried the wounded dignity of a man whose professional reputation was under attack. Dr. Turner came into my emergency room in an agitated state, demanding specific tests and treatments. When I followed standard protocols for her presented symptoms, she became combative and accusatory. What happened to her was tragic, but it wasn't malpractice, and it certainly wasn't racism. Elise watched him speak, remembering the dismissive tone, the assumptions, the way he had looked at her like her pain was an inconvenience. Furthermore, Whitfield continued, the leaked documents that have been referenced today were obtained illegally and taken out of context. Statistics can be manipulated to support any narrative. Dr. Whitfield, Elise interrupted, can you tell this committee what you said to me about my background making me more sensitive to these situations? Whitfield paused. I don't recall making any such statement. Can you tell them what you suggested was causing my pain before you finally agreed to order tests? I suggested multiple possibilities based on your presented symptoms. Gas. You said it was probably gas. Elise's voice was steady, factual. You said my medical knowledge was making me overthink normal pregnancy symptoms. You said I needed anxiety medication. I was exploring all diagnostic possibilities. Dr. Whitfield, how many white women with identical symptoms have you sent home with anxiety medication? The question hung in the air like a blade. Whitfield's composure cracked slightly. I don't keep statistics based on race. Because you don't have to. Because the system doesn't require you to examine your own biases or track your own outcomes by race. Elise leaned forward. Dr. Whitfield, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a product of a system that taught you to see black women's pain as less credible, less urgent, less real than white women's pain. And until we acknowledge that system and change it, more women will die. The hearing room was completely silent. The question isn't whether you intended to discriminate. The question is whether you were trained in a system that discriminates, whether you practice in a system that discriminates, and whether you're willing to support changes that could save lives. Senator Morrison tried one last attack. Dr. Turner, even if we pass this legislation, how do we know it will actually change anything? How do we know this isn't just political posturing? Elise looked out at the crowd, at the women whose stories had become part of a movement larger than any of them had imagined. She thought about Nia, about her lost baby, about Jessica Barnes and Dr. Foster and all the women whose names she would never know. Senator, we don't know. We don't know if this legislation will save lives or just create more bureaucracy. We don't know if bias training will change hearts or just check boxes. We don't know if federal oversight will create accountability or just more ways to hide discrimination. She paused, feeling the weight of 6 months of fighting, of loss, of hope and betrayal and the terrible clarity that came from having nothing left to lose. But we know what happens if we do nothing. We know that the status quo kills black women. We know that silence protects the system and sacrifices the victims. So yes, this might be political posturing. This might be inadequate. This might fail to solve the problem completely. But it's a start. And for women who are dying while we debate whether to start, a start is everything. Chairman Hayes gavelled the hearing closed, but the room erupted in sustained applause that seemed to go on forever. As Elise gathered her papers, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Dr. Whitfield stood behind her, his face pale but resolute. "Dr. Turner, I want you to know. I've been thinking about what you said. About the system, about my training, about the assumptions I might not even know I'm making." He paused. "I'd like to support the legislation. Publicly. If that would help." Elise stared at him, this man who had nearly killed her through his biases, who was now offering to help save other women from the same fate. "Dr. Whitfield, that would help tremendously. But more than that, it would help me believe that people can change. That systems can change. That this fight might actually be worth everything it's cost." As they shook hands in front of the cameras, Elise realized that this moment, this unexpected alliance between victim and perpetrator, this acknowledgement of harm and commitment to healing, this was what victory actually looked like. Not perfect justice, but imperfect progress. Not complete transformation, but enough change to save some lives. And sometimes, for women who had been voiceless for so long, that was everything. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Elise stood in the same emergency room where her nightmare had begun, but this time she wasn't a patient. She was there as the newly appointed Director of Healthcare Equity at Mercy General Hospital, a position that hadn't existed before her testimony changed everything. The Federal Healthcare Equity and Accountability Act had passed by a narrow margin 3 weeks after the hearing, with Dr. Whitfield's unexpected public support providing the crucial momentum needed to sway undecided legislators. The law wasn't perfect, it had been weakened by compromises and amendments, but it was real, and it was already saving lives. "Dr. Turner." A young resident approached her nervously. "I wanted to thank you. The new pain assessment protocols, they helped me catch an ectopic pregnancy last week that I might have missed under the old system." Elise smiled, feeling the weight of validation that no amount of media coverage or political victory could provide. "What was different about how you approached the case?" "The standardized questions, the requirement to document specific pain indicators, and honestly, the bias training made me examine my assumptions about the patient. She was young, black, and I caught myself thinking her pain might be exaggerated. But the new protocols forced me to treat her symptoms as credible until proven otherwise. And emergency surgery, massive internal bleeding. She's alive because the system made me listen to her instead of my unconscious biases." After the resident left, Elise walked through the emergency department where her own trauma had occurred. The changes were visible everywhere: new posters about pain equality, diverse staff training materials, and most importantly, a different energy among the medical personnel. Not perfect, not complete, but different. Her phone buzzed with a text from Devon. "Dinner ready when you get home." Also, Dr. Foster called. She got the department head position in Detroit. The revolution is spreading. Devon, the man who had chosen to stand by her through congressional hearings, criminal charges, which had been quietly dropped after the document leak proved her credibility. A bankruptcy-inducing lawsuit, settled when the hospital faced their own federal investigation, and the slow rebuilding of their life together. They had lost the baby they'd planned, but they'd gained something else, a shared understanding of what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. Last month, they'd started fertility treatments again, not because the pain of their loss had disappeared, but because they'd learned to carry hope alongside grief. The elevator doors opened to reveal Patricia, who was visiting for the first time since her reinstatement at the university. The investigation into her research practices had found no wrongdoing, but the political damage had been significant. She'd aged visibly over the past year, her hair now more silver than black, her eyes carrying the weight of complex truths. "Elise, you have a minute." They walked to Elise's new office, small but real, with a window overlooking the city and walls covered with thank you letters from patients whose lives had been saved by the new protocols. "I owe you an apology," Patricia said without preamble. "Not for the work I was doing, I still believe that was necessary, but for the way I used your trust, your trauma, your story without giving you the full truth about what I was doing. I know. I told myself I was protecting you, giving you plausible deniability, keeping you from having to make impossible choices about your involvement. But really, I was protecting myself, making sure I could have the impact I wanted without having to risk everything the way you did." Elise sat behind her desk, looking at this woman who had been mentor, manipulator, and ultimately, imperfect ally. "Patricia, I've learned something over the past year. People can be right about the big things and wrong about the small things. You were right that the system needed to change and that political pressure was necessary to create that change. You were wrong to manipulate me instead of trusting me to make my own choices. Can you forgive me? I forgave you months ago. The question is whether you can forgive yourself and use that guilt to do better next time. Patricia nodded, tears in her eyes. There's something else. Something you should know. She pulled out a folder. Remember the mysterious friend who kept sending you insider information? The one who warned you about traps and leaked those hospital documents. Elise's heart stopped. What about them? It was Dr. Foster. She'd been working inside the system for years, building evidence, looking for the right moment and the right person to make it all public. Patricia's voice was soft. She chose you, Elise. Not because of any political calculation, but because she believed you had the courage and credibility to see it through. The revelation hit Elise like a physical force. Dr. Foster, the woman whose career had been threatened, who had risked everything to save Jessica Barnes, who had been building a case for years while watching women die. She never told me. She said you needed to know that your choices were really yours, not influenced by knowing how much evidence existed to support you. She said your courage had to be authentic for the movement to be authentic. Elise thought about all the moments when she'd felt alone, manipulated, unsure whether her fight was worth the cost. All along, another black woman in medicine had been building the foundation that would make her success possible. Patricia, I need to call her. She's here. In the waiting room. She flew in for the 6-month anniversary of the legislation. Dr. Angela Foster entered the office with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to fight battles from the shadows. She was smaller than Elise had imagined, with gentle eyes that missed nothing and hands that had saved countless lives. Dr. Turner, it's good to finally meet you properly. Dr. Foster, I don't know how to thank you. The documents you leaked, the warnings you sent, the risks you took. You don't thank me. I thank you. Angela's voice was firm. I had evidence, but I didn't have courage. You had both. You were willing to sacrifice everything to make change happen, and that gave the rest of us permission to step forward. But you sacrificed too. Your anonymity, your safety. I sacrificed my comfort. You sacrificed your life as you knew it. Angela smiled. There's a difference. And besides, look what we built together. She gestured toward the window, where they could see the emergency department below. 6 months ago, this was a place where black women came to die. Today, it's a place where they come to be healed. That's not perfect justice, but it's real progress. Elise's phone rang. Congresswoman Martinez. Dr. Turner, I wanted to give you an update. We've got 17 more states introducing similar legislation based on the federal model. The movement is spreading faster than we anticipated. Any opposition? Massive opposition, but also massive support. The medical schools are starting to revise their curricula. The nursing associations are demanding bias training. Even some insurance companies are realizing that better outcomes for black women mean lower costs for everyone. After hanging up, Elise looked at the two women who had shaped her journey in such different ways. Patricia, who had pushed her into the fight with questionable methods but necessary urgency, and Angela, who had supported her through it with quiet strength and strategic thinking. You know what I've learned? Elise said. Revolution isn't one person having perfect courage. It's imperfect people supporting each other through necessary fights. Her computer chimed with an email from Jessica Barnes, who had become a powerful advocate in her own right. Dr. Turner, I wanted you to know that I spoke at my daughter's school today about speaking up when something is wrong. She's 8 years old, and she told me she wants to be a doctor who listens to people like you did. The future is listening. That evening, Elise drove home through the city where her nightmare had begun and her mission had crystallized. At red lights, she found herself looking at other drivers, wondering about their stories, their fights, their moments of choosing between safety and justice. Devin was waiting with dinner and news of his own. I got a call today from a tech company that wants to develop an app for tracking emergency room treatment disparities. They want me to lead the project. Would you want to do that? I want to do work that matters. I want to be part of building something that makes your fight sustainable rather than heroic. He took her hands. Elise, you saved lives by being willing to destroy your own life. But I want to build systems that save lives without requiring anyone to sacrifice everything. That's the dream, isn't it? That eventually, doing the right thing won't require heroic courage. It will just be how things work. Later that night, Elise sat in her home office, not working on legal documents or media strategies, but on something else entirely, a book proposal. Not an academic text or a policy manifesto, but a story about what it means to fight for justice when the cost is everything you've built and everyone you love. The title page read, "Hear Her Pain: How One Woman's Trauma Became a Revolution." The dedication was simple. For Nia, who deserved better. For the baby we lost, who deserved to live. And for every woman whose pain has been dismissed, minimized, or ignored, may your voices finally be heard. As she typed, Elise thought about the women who would read this book, the ones fighting their own battles against systems designed to silence them. She thought about the medical students who would learn about bias because she had been willing to speak about it publicly. She thought about the black mothers who would survive pregnancies because doctors had been trained to believe their pain. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Dr. Turner, my name is Dr. Sarah Kim. I'm an Asian American emergency physician, and I've been documenting bias against Asian patients for 3 years. Your story gave me the courage to go public with my research. Would you be willing to talk?" Elise smiled, understanding that this was how real change happened, not through one perfect hero saving everyone, but through ordinary people finding the courage to speak truth, support each other, and build movements that were larger than any individual story. She typed back, "Dr. Kim, I would be honored to talk. The revolution needs all of our voices." Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing lives that could be saved, stories that could be told, fights that could be won. Not through perfect heroes or flawless systems, but through flawed people choosing to do better, to fight harder, to love more courageously than the systems trying to silence them. The movement had started with one tweet about personal trauma. It had grown into legislation that would save thousands of lives. But more than that, it had become proof that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they were willing to risk comfort for justice. Elise looked at the photo on her desk, herself and Devon on their wedding day, young and hopeful and unaware of the battles ahead. They looked different now, marked by loss and struggle and hard-won wisdom. But they also looked stronger, more connected, more purposeful. Tomorrow would bring new fights, new women needing support, new systems that needed changing. But tonight, for the first time in over a year, Elise Turner slept peacefully, knowing that her pain had been transformed into power, her trauma into healing, her voice into a movement that would outlive her. The revolution was just beginning. What did this story teach you about the power of transforming personal pain into collective change? About the cost and courage required to challenge systems that harm the most vulnerable? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. In emergency rooms across America tonight, Black women are receiving better care because one woman refused to stay silent about medical racism. Dr. Elise Turner's fictional journey represents the real struggles and victories of countless women who have fought to be heard, believed, and healed. Their voices matter. Their pain is real. And their courage continues.